All right, this video is for you if you have POCD, O OCD, HOCD, or health anxiety, or if you just have intrusive thoughts. Now stay tuned to the end of the video to learn the #1 most effective drug-free way to cure depression. Now let me preface this video by saying I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. I did study psychology, I studied coaching, I studied health and anxiety for the last 20 years, and I've personally recovered from POCD, OCD, and health anxiety. Now, to treat, fix, or recover from this, we're going to use a combination of CBT and ACT. CBT being cognitive behavioral therapy, ACT being, I want to say acceptance and commitment therapy. And we're also using other tools that don't fall under CBT or ACT. For the purposes of this video, OCD refers to any intrusive thoughts which are thoughts that you don't want to have, and any behaviors or compulsions that you do that you don't want to be doing. And I get that O OCD doesn't have compulsions, but I'm still talking to you in this video as well. Okay, so here are the 12 steps. Now, by the end of this video, you should know the 12 steps you need to take in order to start heading down that road to recovery. Step 1, what do we mean by fix or recover? What I mean is that instead of being on a scale of 1 to 10, whereas 10 is the worst for anxiety and 1 is the best, instead of being at a 10 for your OCD intrusive thoughts, your anxiety or depression, you'll be at a 1 to 3, which is a lot more manageable. I don't really think that there's a way to completely get rid of it all, but you'll be able to go through hours throughout the day without feeling that weight on your shoulders. Okay, so we're not aiming for a nothing. We're not aiming for a 0. That's right, perfectionists. Get that out of your head. We're aiming for a 1 to 3. Okay, step 2. Let's talk about subtle and slow exposure therapy. The brain is full of neuroplasticity. Do you know what that means? That means that it was meant to change and grow. That means that even if you've been like this for 20 years, you can still take these steps and make adjustments and change. So it's not like, that's it, I'm like this, there's no way to fix it. No, your brain's not like that. Your brain is constantly changing and growing. And every time that you come head to head or face to face with a compulsion, with an intrusive thought, that's a chance in which to change those patterns. So this is exposure therapy. It's really the only exposure therapy that I would recommend. That being because, let me run you through a scenario. So OCD changes patterns throughout your life. So when I was, I want to say 8 years old, I was afraid that I would get AIDS. This was a huge health anxiety, OCD thing for me. I was afraid I would have it because I was molested when I was a child, so I was afraid that I would get AIDS. Somehow I heard about it somewhere, I didn't know, I didn't talk to anyone about it. This was just a weight that carried inside of me. Was like an obsession with me. It was almost, I guess you could say, my first introduction to OCD. But then it transmuted to when I was about 15 to 18, around there, into POCD, which meant that I was afraid that I would molest children. I was afraid I would molest my own children. I was afraid that I would do that to other people. The thought terrified me. It paralyzed me. It was definitely POCD. So, transmutes another 10 years later when I'm in my 20s, all of a sudden I'm a huge germaphobe. Huge, as in wearing gloves all the time. That was me. So this is what I mean by it transmutes. So we're gonna deal with the underlying causes. That's what these 12 steps do. We're not just gonna deal with the surface thing, which is, for example, if you're afraid of dogs, well, great, by the end of exposure therapy, you should be able to hug a dog. Okay, that's great. But then it's gonna transmute to something else in another few years. 5 years later, you might find that you're terrified of, I don't know, germs. So these 12 steps, we're really tackling the underlying issues. Now, this is the important part of this step, of the exposure step. The most important thing to remember when it comes to exposure therapy, and remember, we talked about how I really don't think that works per se long-term because you're not dealing with the underlying issues, but every thought you have, that's an exposure, right? Every time you get anxious, every time you get a compulsion, that's exposure. So it's an exposure therapy. What really is important with this step is every time you do something that makes you anxious, even slightly anxious, you're weakening the power of anxiety. And that means that the less power OCD will have over you. So doing things that make you kind of nervous, a little bit nervous, is okay. That's good. You want to do that. If that isn't the biggest kick in the pants, that doing things that make you feel anxious will eventually weaken anxiety, that's kind of a kick in the pants in my mind. So 3, educating yourself. Educating yourself is what you're doing here. You're learning about the mind, how it works. You're learning about OCD. You're learning about anxiety. You're learning about all these things that impact your life and what you can do about them. So awareness is huge when it comes to OCD, so that you'll understand what the heck is going on and why you have this, whereas John over there doesn't have this. Okay, step number 4, and this is probably one of the biggest steps to this whole package, I guess you could say, to this whole treatment plan, if you will, given to you by a non-doctor, a non-therapist, a non-professional. People with OCD need more vitamins and minerals than the average person. Your brain needs these things. And I'm not just talking like, oh, tomorrow you'll stay away from that sugary donut and then you'll be improved. No. This is a serious life overhaul we're talking here. If you don't want to do a diet change, you can also go to truehope.com and take those pills. True Hope is the most researched supplement in the world, and it's a collection of vitamins and minerals put together. And I've seen it work on people. I've seen 4 days, I want to say the depression or the OCD just lift off of them, and they described it like a veil lift. But listen, if you don't want to take pills, and a lot of people who are anxious don't want to take pills, I don't like to. What you can do is two things. You can remember that, hey, you're taking pills and it's for a short-term thing till you finally work through this stuff. No harm in that, and I congratulate you on it. The other thing is you gotta start seriously increasing the amount of fruits and vegetables and greens you have on a daily basis. I'm talking salad's gonna be your new best friend. You're gonna have one every day. You're gonna have smoothies and shakes, and they're gonna have spinach in them, but not just spinach. You gotta have some kale in there, which kind of makes it bitter, but some spirulina, some barley grass juice, like all this stuff to get as many minerals into your mind as you possibly can. And every time you have sugar and every time you have like that donut, it draws vitamins and minerals out and away from your mind. So we're gonna work on eating whole grains and incorporating as much as you can. Now, there's a lot of diet books that talk about it. I'm not sitting here trying to preach a diet to you per se. The diet books I like are the medical medium ones, but it's up to you. But either way, we're talking lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, and low fat. Not a ton of fat, but some fats, some healthy fats, if you will, every day. And this is not a short process. So when I did this, let me tell you about, so when I was in my 20s, and I was a huge germaphobe, right? I was afraid of contamination. I had huge contamination fears. Well, my health was also in decline. It was suffering terribly. And so I knew I would have to do something. And my health kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so finally I was like, the only thing I can do is do a huge diet overhaul, as in I did just like a massive diet overhaul. What I intended to do was repair my body. I didn't know that it would repair my mind. So a lot of the OCD, not all of it, but a lot of the OCD and the impulsive and the compulsions and the contamination fears left one day. It was the craziest thing. It happened, I want to say a few weeks to a few months in. I don't remember the exact date because I wasn't expecting it. I didn't pay attention to it, and all of a sudden, things that I was terrified of contamination before, I was one of those people that was at the grocery store that's like taking their milk, for example, and putting it in one of those little veggie bags before I even got to the counter, the checkout counter. That was me. And this was before COVID. So now you see people doing it. You're like, oh, they must have something. They don't want to catch COVID. I get it. Whereas, no, this was back then when people would stare at those people and be like, what the heck's wrong with them? So remember, if you don't like salad, you can have shakes, you can have smoothies, or just find a good dressing you like. And again, your new best friend is salad. Romaine lettuce, people. We're not talking iceberg here. Okay, number 5, understand your need for reassurance. So people with OCD are continually searching for reassurance. They want a 100% guarantee that they are not going to have sex with another man, that they are not going to molest children, that they are not going to die of cancer. And unfortunately, there's no guarantees at all. Being an adult means being okay, not having a 100% guarantee on anything. And it sucks. But that is life. There is no 100% guarantee. So every time you're searching from Google and you think you found it and you found peace for a little bit, really all you're doing is strengthening the anxiety. Even when you self-talk to yourself and you're like, I've never done that before, so I would never do it. I've lived on this earth so many years and that's never happened. And I've never engaged in that, so I would never do it. And such and such and such. That is, you're searching for a form of reassurance from yourself. So being an adult means being okay being unsure. So how do you get okay being unsure? You just have to practice. You have to tell yourself, there's no 100% guarantees for anything. I may do that, but I may not. I have to accept that both are options. You may molest a child. You may never molest a child. Both are options. Yes, one is more likely than the other, but that doesn't matter. The point is you're seeking a 100% guarantee, and that doesn't exist. So we just got to remind ourselves a 100% guarantee doesn't exist. So while I think I may try and find something searching on Google that indicates that I do not have a tumor or that I do not have cancer, that even when I find something, I'll feel better in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to perpetuate the anxiety and I'm going to head back out there and do it again. That's the same for a doctor's meeting. Say you go to a doctor, or say you go to a therapist, a counselor, a priest, and they tell you that they are sure that that's not going to happen, that you are not going to do that, that that's not in your personality, that that doesn't happen, that they've seen no indication that you can do that, you feel such relief. You have left, you feel relief, like, oh, thank goodness, that's not going to happen to me. Only, the problem is that it's short-lived. It's short-lived. So you can get productive reassurance. You can go to the doctor, run some tests. He can tell you, no, there's a 98% chance that that's not going to happen to you. And you're like, oh, relief. But unfortunately, when you go home, productive relief as well, or unproductive relief, which is searching yourself on Google, is still short-lived. So repeating to yourself, yes, that could happen, but yes, that could not happen. I have to accept that both are possibilities, is part of being an adult, and that's just something you'll have to get used to. Those are words that you need to repeat to yourself. There's no 100% guarantees. Yeah, being an adult, kind of rough. So just to reiterate, no matter who you talk to, no matter what you Google, no matter what drugs you take, there is no 100% guarantee for anything in this world, in this life. It doesn't exist. So you can almost take relief from knowing like, hey, that's what I was searching for, and that's why I do a lot of these things, and okay, but now you got to get used to that phrase. You got to get used to there's no 100% guarantee. Can you say, please like and subscribe?
Please like do right.
And hit the bell for notifications.
Hit bell you notification.
All right, now one of the biggest steps, which is understanding intrusive thoughts. So your mind is like the ocean, and thoughts, you have millions of thoughts every day that swim through, and humans think the most gross, disgusting, and vile thoughts ever. That's human nature. It is what we do. So thinking that there's something wrong with you because you thought something disgusting and vile is not the case. Not only that, you think these thoughts and you don't even pay attention to them. Like you could be driving down the road and think, what if I did that? Oh wait, and then you ignore it because because it doesn't affect your core values. But the second a thought comes in that goes against your core values, the shock value will wake you up. You will be like, wait, why did I think that? And the reason it's so impactful, the reason you take notice is because it goes against who you are as a person, your core values. It goes against something you would never, ever, ever do. Granted, there's no 100% guarantee, but we'll go 99.9% guarantee that you wouldn't do that. And so you become alerted to it, like, oh, that's horrific. Why did I think that? What is wrong with me? Why can't I stop thinking that? I'm sure you've been there. I'm sure you're there on a daily basis. Now, what do you do about it? Now, remember that this list I'm about to give you is not a one-time works all. Like, hey, I did it on Monday. Again, Tuesday, I'm fixed. No, this is something that you're going to have to work with and go through. But let me tell you what worked for me. And this is the best intrusive thought list I could find, because for years I've had them, and for years I have scoured the internet and listened to the experts and the doctors and the professionals and the therapists and just the random people, and I didn't find it helpful. These are what I found helpful, and hopefully you will find them helpful to you in some way. Number one, again, we got to go back to there's the 100% guarantee. Yes, I may do that, but also yes, I may not do that. Number two, you can do the think about it later technique. You know, I'm in the middle of something right now and I will think about that, but I'm going to think about it later, okay? Because we're not going to engage. You're not going to engage with these thoughts. I'll explain more. As you go through this video, you will understand what I mean about not engaging with your OCD monster. Okay, number three, understand and accept that humans think disgusting things. We do. The most vile things you could possibly think about, humans have thought about them. Number four, you can try a distraction technique. You can try that. But what I think works best is number five, and that is do nothing. Let that thought sit in there and do nothing. Let me give you an example. So a few days ago, I was out at a park pool and I happened to see a child that was naked, but we're at the pool and so people are changing out of the swimsuits. And because I saw a glimpse of this and because I used to have POCD, so that was a huge fear of mine, this thought was like an intrusive thought. And occasionally it would pop into my head during the day, like, oh, I saw what that looked like. I remember what that looked like. Stop. And so what did I do? Did I panic? My first instinct, and your first instinct when you get something like that, is to run. It's to run the other way. It's to say, stop. What are you doing? No. And try and distract yourself and try to talk yourself out of it. And then you're hit with this overwhelming depression, like, oh, how terrible of a person am I? I can't tell anyone. They'll think I'm crazy. They'll think I'm gonna hurt someone. What I did is nothing. I sat and let the thought sit there. That weakens the thought. I let the picture sit in my mind and it would weaken it. It was like waves. It would just get weaker and weaker and weaker. I didn't engage. I didn't distract. Just sat there, and that weakened the power of it. So try that. It might help you too. Also remember, and this is kind of a bonus step, is that if you tell someone like a therapist, a priest, someone about that thought, it really does weaken the power of it as well. So there are two things you can do, but you don't have to. Like, I haven't told anyone about that thought that I had because I didn't want anyone to think, truthfully, I didn't even tell my husband because I didn't want anyone to think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with her? Gosh, she's so weird. Because if you don't understand about OCD tendencies, if you don't understand about intrusive thoughts, and even though 98% of the population has them, I'm still convinced that some people don't know about them. Like, some people don't know, and if you told them that, they'd be like, oh. So tell a therapist know about intrusive thoughts. Okay, question break. What kind of videos do you want me to do more of? Do you want me to do more OCD, more health anxiety, more POCD, more HOCD? Leave them in the comments and let me know what kind of videos you want me to do, or if you want me to stop doing them altogether, go ahead. And if you subscribe to my channel, well, then I'll know, yes, you want more videos, and yes, you want me to keep producing them, because this is kind of a test. It's kind of a test to see if anyone finds this interesting or if anyone finds this helpful. But I'm not done yet. We're not through the 12 steps. All right, number 7. I know, 7. Understand perfectionism. Perfectionism is not really great. Perfectionism compounds the problem of OCD and anxiety. It puts a lot of pressure on yourself. You're so critical of yourself and you probably don't even realize you're doing it. Also, procrastination is a result of perfectionism. It is too much to start that project to the last minute because you're too overwhelmed. There's too many factors going on and overwhelmed as well. So sometimes you don't even want to start projects because it's like, oh, because you put this level of perfectionism on you as to what standard it's got to be. So the main problem with perfectionism, though, is that it causes such judgment on yourself. It causes you to be so critical of yourself when during these times you especially need you to be supportive of the little child or the person you are. There's no such thing as perfectionism because perfectionism is in the eye of the beholder and everyone has a different idea. So I aim for excellence, not perfectionism. I am smart enough. I am good enough. My work is good enough. And remember, sometimes it may even help to say you're a perfectionist in the way of, oh, you know, this has to be super clean and everything has to be super clean. Maybe leave something out on the couch or on a table. Just leave it out overnight. Just to try and, you know, again, testing those boundaries, right? Testing those boundaries. So remember too, if you're a perfectionist, besides the important self-talk that you need to have going on, is to chunk things. So when you look at your kitchen, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't clean that. Because you picture in your head how you want it, which means you got to go through 1,000 different steps. My husband has ADD, so he's very much like that. He's got to go through 1,000 different steps, like the perfectionist level of that he's got going on. It definitely limits you into what you want to start. Like, you really got to psych yourself up to do stuff. So instead, let's not do that. Let's work at, you know, we're aiming for excellence, not perfectionism, and let's chunk stuff. So say you go into the kitchen, maybe day 1, you're going to throw out garbage. Just throw out garbage. Maybe you're going to wash a couple plates. I'm going to wash some plates. That's it for day 1. So let's chunk things. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. If you get to them, you get to them. If you don't, you don't. Remember, you're going to take it easy on yourself from now on. Just repeat to yourself, I am good enough. This is good enough for now. This is good enough for now. And yeah, you know, there's this trap that, oh, I could be a better person. Yeah, we all could be. The entire world in every area could be better at something, at everything. That's a trap. That's a trap. I mean, it's almost like when you're studying for an exam, there's always more studying you could do. You're never at a limit where you're like, you know what? I've studied enough. Not really. There's always more you could do. It's like that for everyone in every single area. So you have to accept that, you know what? This is good enough. Good enough is great, people. Good enough is the new excellence. All right, this is my favorite thing. This is what I call the anxiety monster. This is one of the things written about in the book. So the book is mostly applicable if you have health anxiety. It's not going to be applicable if you have OCD per se. You might find some things that are good in it, but it was written specifically for people who have health anxiety. But the anxiety monster is applicable to you. So every day in your brain, it's like you have an opponent. And I call him the anxiety monster. And every day he's telling you what to do. Don't touch that. Check your body again. Scan that thing again. Oh, you better go check to see if you did that. Oh, we better not eat that. Oh, we better not touch that. Oh, we better wash that. Oh, we better... On and on and on, all day long, he gives you demands. He also sends you things that you don't want to see. He sends you like gross pictures into your head that you're like, ah, ooh, basically called intrusive thoughts. He does this because he's going for shock value. So every day that you ignore him or that you do the opposite of whatever it is he tells you, you get a point. And every time you go through your normal rituals, or you go through, or you give in to the anxiety, or you give in to the intrusive thoughts, he gets a point. Now don't worry, because he's gonna get a lot of points, especially in the beginning. But in the end, you're gonna start to get some, because you're gonna understand how he works. That's what he does. There's an opponent, and you can name it whatever you want. I call it my anxiety monster. Sometimes my anxiety monster is like, hey, you better wash your hands. Hey, you better not eat that. Hey, that might be contaminated. Well, kill me now. Come after me. Bring your worst. That's okay. Because a lot of times what we're afraid of is fear of being afraid in the future. A lot of times it's what we're trying to protect ourselves from. We're trying to protect ourselves from feeling feelings. And we'll talk about that more in the next step. But first, I just want to make sure I've wrapped up everything with the anxiety monster so you understand what to do. When your anxiety monster is like, wash your hands, you're not going to be like, no, I'm not doing that, because that's engaging in a battle, and that is something, it's almost like a battle you're not going to win. What you can do, because there's just so much emotion there, which is why you're not going to win it. Like, there's just so much on your side, emotion there. So to say, I'm not gonna wash my hands today. I'm not gonna double check that. I'm not gonna make sure this is okay. No, what we're gonna do, that puts us in a battle, and the health anxiety monster is probably gonna win. What we're gonna do is we're gonna say, I'll do it later. So you either do the opposite or you do it later. I'll do it later. So just put it off. Even if it's for 5 minutes, who gives a darn? You're starting to change the patterns. Don't beat yourself up when it comes to giving into OCD compulsions, because this is your way of showing yourself love. This is, you are faced with something that in your mind is a terrible fear. The logic side of your brain can't send messages to the anxious part of your brain, but the anxious part of your brain can send tons of stuff to the logic part. The logic can't send any back. Also, I don't know which sides those are, but you get what I'm saying. That's true, that it can't. The logic part can't send messages back. So you're doing your best to protect yourself every time you engage in these compulsions. So don't beat yourself up for them. They're self-care, but we're working to change it to better self-care, to more productive self-care, to self-care that really helps us. Now, another thing you can say to your anxiety monster when it sends you some gross images, oh, you're going for shock value there, are you? Kind of working, kind of working. Kind of starting to feel a little bit depression, but you know, so whatever it is, just be honest with it. You know what I mean? Like, treat it like you know what it's doing. You know the game it's playing. You know the game your mind's playing with you. You're not fooled to it anymore. I've just revealed it to you. This is what's going on. Oh my gosh, are we only at number 9? Okay, we're talking about catastrophizing? Catastrophic thoughts or catastrophizing. People of OCD, this is our bread and butter. This is what we do. We see worst case scenario. That's why we avoid a lot of stuff, because we're afraid of being afraid in the future, but we avoid a lot of stuff. We engage in certain rituals. We think certain rituals. We distract ourselves with certain rituals because we're afraid of catastrophic feelings. Catastrophic thoughts. Catastrophic thoughts, it's cognitive defect, which means it's wrong. It doesn't, like, it's not correct. It's not honest. So to actually act like when you think, oh my gosh, I just got cut, I'm gonna end up in the hospital, that's catastrophic thoughts. Catastrophic thoughts have no validity. That means that they're not true. So to act like they're true is kind of giving them validity, and you don't need to do that. What you need to do is recognize that it's a catastrophic thought. Yeah, that's what I do. OCD, I tend to catastrophize. Or health anxiety, that's what I do. So what I do is try and picture a stop sign right there in your head, like a stop sign right away shuts that down, because there's no point in having a conversation about it because it's not true. There's no validity to it. That's just what you do. Because you have OCD, you tend to catastrophize. And maybe you do it, maybe you're not aware that you do it, or maybe you do it in a variety of different situations. Maybe you tend to, if you're late on a bill, you're like, the interest is gonna go up. However, your catastrophic thinking manifests itself. There's other ways of thinking too that OCD has. There's other cognitive defects, but catastrophizing is one of the big ones. So just be aware of it. 10, every time you engage in distraction techniques, in compulsions, even anxiety, it's all really a form of distracting you. You're distracting yourself from what? From feeling things, from feeling shame, from feeling unlovable, from feeling not good enough, from feeling guilt. All these feelings are in you. Now remember, this is a trap that you have perfected for decades. So at first you may not notice you're doing it, but all of a sudden when you go to engage in something that is not helpful, whether it's scrolling on Facebook, whether it is washing your hands, a compulsion, whatever it is, ask yourself, or maybe it's even setting another goal. Like you're like, you know, I should set another goal. Whatever it is, ask yourself, why am I entering this? What am I covering up? What am I afraid of feeling? What am I feeling right now? And then just feel it. Just feel it. Because that will help weaken the power of all those things. It'll help weaken the power of anxiety. It'll help weaken the power of the OCD has over you. What are you denying feeling? What are you avoiding feeling? That's it. You don't need 1,000 other questions. You just need to know, yeah, this is what I'm feeling, and feel it. Yeah, I feel like ass right now, and feel it. So let's get to number 10, which is important questions. Now, one of the important questions to ask yourself, you should always be in a conversation with yourself and always be asking questions, sort of a helpful way to break through some of these things. And one of the questions you should be asking yourself is, when you start to notice that you're engaging in anxious behaviors, is, hey, what am I feeling? Not like, what am I feeling, what emotions I'm feeling, meaning on the scale of, this is a little bit different, on the scale of 1 to 10, what level is my anxiety at? Because you may be running away from it, thinking that it's at a 10, when really you're like, hey, I'm only at a 3 or a 4. So I feel uncomfortable right now, but I'm still okay. Because checking in with yourself will really help clarify. Like, hey, I'm not as anxious as I thought I was. I'm only at a 5. So not fun, not good times, but not run for cover times, okay? So other questions you can ask yourself is if I didn't have OCD, would I do it? Like, can I still go to that party? Even though I'll be really anxious? Can I still do that? Can I still go to the swimming pool? Can I still go do that even though I'll be anxious and uncomfortable and there are things that I'm gonna feel that I'm not gonna like? Can I still do that? Okay, so let's talk about number 12. We're finally here, the anxiety cure. So the cure for anxiety. So the number one most effective treatment for anxiety is to focus on type 2 actions. So there's type 1 and type 2 actions. Type 1 actions are actions that you want to engage in. So I feel like watching Netflix. I feel like reading books. I feel like laying in bed. So these are things that you want to engage in, that you feel like you're like, hey, I want to do that. Type 2 actions are actions that you should engage in. Okay, and I'm not talking like let's should all over ourselves. We're not putting on these super high expectations or super high things that we should be doing. We're talking about like, I should call Jane and talk to Jane, but not about my OCD, just talk to her in general. I should have a conversation with someone. I should go for a walk. I should go in and clean up some of the dishes in the kitchen, not the whole kitchen, but just some of it. I should make my bed. So these are actions that while you do them, you will not feel good. You will be like, I do not want to be doing this. Like even if it's like going out to a dinner with family or whatever makes you anxious, say you're engaging in something that borders that or you're doing that. Yeah, I don't want to be doing this. What I want to be doing is staying home. I want to be hiding under my covers. I don't want to be hanging out with my friends. I don't want to do this. Type 2 actions are actions that while you're doing them, you don't want to do them, but at the end, there's a marked improvement in your mood. So you feel better about yourself. It's not long term. We're not talking it's going to last like 15 minutes or, like days, okay? But afterward, you feel a marked improvement in your mood. So we're talking about like small actionable things you can do. So for example, making the bed. So for example, calling someone and talking on the phone. So for example, meditating for 1 minute. Sure, your perfectionist side is like, I'm gonna meditate for 20 minutes twice a day. Yeah, let's go for realism here, people. You don't wanna decrease the odds of you doing something, so it's gotta be small. So like working out, okay, I'm gonna do 10 push-ups today. I get it, it's small, but you're also creating a habit. This is like a baseline, and it's gotta be small because you don't wanna overwhelm yourself. You don't wanna stop doing it because if you make it too hard in any which way, it's gonna be too hard. So hey, I'm gonna go for a walk around the block. Hey, when I'm anxious, I'm going to, there's certain things I do too. Like when I'm anxious, maybe I wanna curl up in a ball and sob, but when I'm anxious, it makes me feel better if I go for a drive. Or it makes me feel better if I go for a walk. So also planning out what you're gonna do next time you get into this whole mood and it just becomes too much for you. What are you gonna do? Because it's gonna happen again. That's life, especially as you're dealing with this stuff. It's gonna get easier and there's gonna be a lot of wins, but there's also gonna be some things that, maybe don't go as planned or don't go as well as you thought. So just remember, we're starting small here. Small actions you can do that at the end, you will feel better. So you don't wanna do them, but you're gonna do them. And then at the end, you'll feel better. That is the number one way. It's based on the CBT, the number one way to cure depression. I mean, it's statistically reported. This isn't me saying it. And no, I'm not linking any stats down there. You can probably just Google it and find out. Okay, so I hope these steps help. Remember, please subscribe to my channel just so I know that people exist and people actually want to see this stuff. Okay? So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.